Hello, everybody. This is our, this is our monthly tour, which used to be on Tuesdays. So it's now on Wednesdays for a while, I think. But anyways, today we're going to talk about peonies and irises, as Chris had said. And when I originally came up with this idea in, I think, February, I was taking into account what our past peony and iris season has been. We're a little bit ahead this year. So we're missing out on some things and we're going to pick up some other things. So we're going to go around the garden and look at a few of our different types of irises, as well as a couple groups of different types of peonies that we're going to have that are really good for your garden. So anyways, we're here in the Asian Valley at the first plant I'm going to talk about. And it actually, I'll get a little bit of background information. It's one of the irises, and generally irises are in the iris family, the Iridaceae, which there's over 2,000 different species in the Iridaceae. And of that 2,000, between 200 and 300 are true irises. It goes back and forth. They kind of lump and split things all the time, like we have iris, or actually Bellum canda chinensis in the garden, which we're not going to see today, but that one is sometimes Iris domestica. I never know what to call it anymore. It's one or the other. And then we have another one, Hermodactylus Tuberosa, which is a winter flowering iris relative, which is sometimes Iris tuberosa. So I don't know where they're putting that today. So I don't know if we have 202 or if we have 300 irises or whatever, you know. It just varies, but it's a big group of really cool plants in the world. The irids or the iris family includes other things that you may know, like gladiolus, for instance, and some of you in the south and west, maybe freesias. We might see a cypella in the garden. I can't remember if it's a cypella or a herbertia, but anyways, there's a whole bunch of other different irids that are out there as well. But the biggest group that you know are the irises. And from what I know, they originated, I was reading last night, I guess they thought they originated in Antarctica, but that was many millions and millions and millions of years ago when it was a little further north. And then it was, also connected in with South Africa and Australia. And so those are actually, South Africa and Australia are really high density iris relatives are found in those areas. But most of the irises, they're found all over the world. It's really wide distribution for them. There's a lot of specific things for those other irids. But so most of our irises come from Europe and Asia, a few from North Africa, as well as North America. I'm sure there's some others that are in outlier areas as well, but that's where you get the majority of them. So the first group here we're going to look at is a species from, I had to look this up, the crested irises, the Evensias, which I'm going to get down here in the ground and we're going to look at a couple, at least one here in place. And then I have some cut ones because there aren't any others near here. But the first one here is Iris japonica. This is Iris japonica porcelain maiden. It's a white or nearly white selection of the Iris japonica, which they come from Japan and China. And I've looked it up. In the wild, this species grows on forest edges, and it actually likes shade. It also grows in wet grasslands. Here we grow it in the shade. I don't know what it would do in the wet, but if you're here in North Carolina and you need a ground cover for shade, this is actually a pretty good plant. It's spreads slightly vigorously. A couple years ago, this was just a couple plants. We had nearly lost it. I think we had a little bit too much sun on it at that time. Our canopy has changed and it has exploded in this area. I have about a 15, 20 foot square, or that is, square of patch of this Iris japonica porcelain maiden in here. But on the edges where it gets a little bit of sun, I don't know if Alexander can point down here. There's some that are a little bit sadder looking. They're getting a little more sun here and they're yellowy and they don't like it. So this is one that really is a good shade plant. does not like the sun. I say it's the vampire. If it gets out in the sun, it burns up. it becomes fire and just goes away. So as long as you have shade, this is a great one. And I know a lot of my volunteers here at the Arboretum, they tell me, we don't have any sun left in our garden. We have shade and I need a ground cover that flowers. This would be a great one for that. I will say that it doesn't flower every year really well for us, but this year was a spectacular year. We have another patch of another cultivar over here that it's already finished just to the side over here, but it was most spectacular this year. The species is rated through zone 7B, though it can venture a little bit further north, though it's not as happy. We had a mild winter, and I think that might be why we had such a good bloom this year, but it's doing great in this bed right here. Another, I'm going to bring out another couple here that I have as cut specimens, and Chris decided to break one of them. This is Iris tectorum, which are the roof irises. These are just two selections we have here. So one of the Elba, the white form, and then this is actually one that Mark collected a seed on one of his trips to China, which has been really good. They're just finishing up. We were just down to, I had to really look for these flowers. Unlike this porcelain maiden Japonica over here, who's still fully at it. These were down to just a handful of flowers throughout the whole garden. But anyways, these are a little bit bigger than the leaves anyways, than the Irish Japonica. It's a much wider blade, but these are in the same group, the Evansias, or crested irises. Again, they'll take shade, which is another great thing for us here, where we're always wanting something to fill that dark spot, and they'll take part sun as well. This one, on the other hand, does not spread aggressively. It's a nice clumper. They do spread a little bit, but never too many of them. They're in really easygoing iris. And as I said, roof iris is one of their common names. If you had a green roof that was partly shaded, like you have a tool shed and you want to spruce it up and put a green roof on it, really cool plant you can put on it. I've seen one of our volunteers do this with an archway that she built with lattice on the sides, and she had a platform on top with like 4 to 6 inches of media, and she was growing Iris tectorum on it year round. And it flowered reliably. So it's a really good iris for us here in the Mid-Atlantic. I think it probably goes into zone 6. I don't know if it goes into zone 5 or not, but it is more cold tolerant than that of Iris Japonica. But limited colors on these. They're typically like the Iris Japonicas. They're soft whites and purples, softer shades. And again, the same color range for the Iris tectorum. So if anybody's into natives, I don't have it here at the moment. They've already finished flowering here in the garden, as well as our native populations. Iris cristata. This is a largely Asian group, but there are a handful that have escaped Asia. And our Iris cristatas, which are the crested irises in the mountains here, and actually here in the Piedmont of North Carolina, going north into the northeastern United States, you'll find them, and the Midwest. That is another iris in this group of irises. So I think that covers this group of irises. We're going to see a few others. I may mention some others that we don't have to show you along the way, but so that's good. We're just going to briefly stop over here and see Bartzella, what's left of her. There's one blossom left. And I don't want to touch her. And you don't have to get real close, Chris. So, because if I get too close to her, she might fall apart. As many of our peonies are doing right now, is they are shattering. But this is Bartzella, and this brings us to the first of the groups of peonies that we're going to talk about. And we'll learn a little bit more about these later on. But this is Bartzella. She's an intersectional peony. They're often called Idopenies, I-T-O-H, which I have to look up the name here of the guy, the fellow. Give me just a moment, because I can't remember it all. Let's see, where do I have it? I have cheat sheets here. Okay, the intersectionals are Idopenies. They're crosses between tree peonies and herbaceous peonies. Peony Lactiflora, which you'll see later on here. There's still a few flowers left on that in the garden. That is your typical group of peonies most of you are growing. I grew up in Western Pennsylvania, and almost all of them were Lactiflora hybrids or selections. And we'd see them on cemeteries and whatnot. But anyways, in my grandmother's yards. But this is a cross between one of them and one of the tree peony species, Peonia Lutea, which is one of the names for it. They keep on changing them, but that's what I'm going to go with for right now. So Lutea meaning, I think of yellow, and that yellow comes out in this hybrid here. But anyways, the Itos were first created successfully by, I'm going to murder his name, I'm sorry, Toichi, which is Toichi Ito, in the early 60s. He was able to accomplish this hybrid between a tree peony and herbaceous peony. I don't know what the original one was, but this is a hybrid from the 80s, actually. This is Barcella. It was made by a breeder, R.F. Anderson. He was apparently a well-known breeder because several of the peonies that I was looking up had him as the breeder. And this is Barcella. It was this beautiful yellow hybrid between a tree peony and an herbaceous peony. And a little more about that. The tree peonies for us here, they're long done. We have them as early as late March flowering, and they're typically done by mid-April, not mid-March. But they are very short-lived. The individual flowers on them, if we have a warm spell, they'll only last 2 to 3 days sometimes. If it gets windy, they shatter very quickly. But these interspecifics or intersectional peonies, the flowers last a bit longer, despite the fact that these have already shattered. This had been flowering for a week and a half or two. And we didn't have as a big show this year, but some years we've had over 30 or 40 flowers on this one clump. And it was planted here, I believe, in about 2010 is when I stuck this in the ground. So let me check. No, take that back. 2011 is when we got this planted here. So this is the first of the Itos that we're going to see. And now, Chris.
Tim, we have a question in the chat for you.
Sure.
Kathy would like to know, do the Idopenies do better in the Southeastern coastal zone 8A, than herbaceous peonies?
My guess is they might. They have less heat requirement, chill requirement. So they're a little more heat tolerant, but they still won't last real long, but they're going to hold up really well, I think, in the coastal plain, probably better than the Lactiflora hybrids.
Okay. And Diane is wondering, what do you mean by intersexual?
Intersectional. So it's a tree peony crossed with an herbaceous peony, they were like this. They're too far apart in general, but they figured out how to get them. This is Peonia Lutea. Apparently, is close enough to Lactiflora to actually make a successful hybrid. Well, there's some other species of tree peonies. I think it's Otii or something like that. It's one of the species with an O, anyways. And I think Fruticosa. Those apparently they have not used to make the hybrids. They're a little bit too far away through time, that they've been separated too long, and they haven't made successful hybrids. But they've been able to do it between a tree that is the tree peony that is Peonia Lutea, that species, and the Lactifloras. I didn't look up to see how many different species of peonies there are. I should have done that. But peonies are mostly found in Southern Europe over into Asia, into East Asia. You get most of your tree peonies are in Southeast Asia. And there's one freaky species of peony in California that survives. So, and there might be another species, but there's just 1 or 2 species in North America on the West Coast, up along, Oregon, Washington, and California. The rest of them are Old World. Like I said, from East Asia the whole way over into Europe. So this one's a little bit past. It looked so nice the other day. On Monday, it still looked great.
Thank you, Tim.
Look at this, Chris. So we're gonna go right here. This is an older cultivar of Lactiflora, or in the Lactiflora group. This is your general hybrids of peonies. This is one called Miss America, and she was gorgeous the first of the week before we had lots of wind and not significant amounts of rain and near 90 temperatures, which has really taken its toll on these. But you can see how many blossoms are on this one. Let me look up a little bit more about Miss America. I have it somewhere here. Miss America, she's from 1936. And there was a breeding group, apparently, Mann and Van Steen. That's who registered her many years ago, you know. What is that, like 80? No, 90, almost, no. 80 some years ago now. Anyways, you can see beautiful flowering one, but she's a little floppy. And because it was so warm and dry, we have not had any good rain here. She has flopped a bit, but this is one that has gotten all kinds of awards over the many decades that it's been available. I really like it. It really is a nice backdrop. And while we're in this spot, I might talk a little bit about one companion plant that I really like with some of the white peonies anyways. I wouldn't use this one with a pink peony, but just to my right here, there is a dichelostemum called Pink Diamond, which is possibly a naturally occurring hybrid, but they sometimes just put it in, I think, congestum or something like that, which it's an a Californian bulb or a West Coast bulb. The dichelostemums are found in California, Oregon, and Washington primarily. But really cool. It flowers at the same time as your peonies. And as soon as it's done flowering, it will go dormant and you don't have to look at it. Typically, the peonies have gorgeous foliage most of the summer, even here. I'll deadhead these whenever they're done flowering, and then so I'll just have a green, small bush almost of green. So it fits right in here in our geophyte border. But this is the first of our cultivars of Lactiflora type or herbaceous herbaceous peonies, not tree peonies. But again, like I said, this is one of my favorite combos with that. But I wouldn't do it with a pink one. I would only do it with a white peony. And there's another similar species over here that we'll stop at in just a moment. But to show you this older breeding here with Miss America versus one over here, it's a much newer breeding. I don't know if Alexander can get this or not.
We can go
But
over
we're going to see. This is White Frost. And this is from 1991. And this one, I think, has gotten some awards as well. I should say many of the peonies and the bearded iris that we're going to see today, the peonies came from the American Peony Society. They gave us a major donation a few years ago, and that's where most of them have come from. And the Iris Society, local Iris Society, has given us a couple sets of some really good bearded iris, which we're just going to show a handful of them, as well as a few other iris. But anyways, this is one of the newer hybrids, so only about 30 years old. But look at the structure on this one. Very strong stems, compact and held upright. This White Frost is noted for this characteristic. So it's not as floppy as the older cultivars, but still good bud set. I will say it's later flowering, and for us, that might not be a good thing, as I don't know if you can see, these flowers are not quite happy and they're not going to open entirely because we're warming up so much. I don't think it's actually the fact that we haven't had any good rain in this case, but because I will go and give you a little bit more information on the Lactiflora, because that's our next peony that we're going to look at. But they come from rocky, dry areas, often on woodland edges in riverbanks in, Eastern Asia, Siberia to Mongolia, for instance, growing in dry, open, stony slopes, riverbanks, open woods. That's where you find these in reality in the wild. So they're actually adapted to full sun and well-drained sites that are often a little bit on the dry side. So, but the flowers just don't last as long as we heat up so quickly. In the wild, they probably aren't. It doesn't get so warm as quickly as it does here. So And while we're right here, another plant, if you want to put, it's next of kin to the last dichelostemum I showed you. This is one of my favorites, Dichelostemum idomei. It has these beautiful red and green flowers. Again, it's already starting to go dormant as it's in full flower, but looks really nice with the white peonies. And it'll totally disappear around the plant. You can just clean up around the plant later on. But this one is just growing on its own. But one of my favorites, a good combo plant with that. So we're gonna go down the pathway a little bit further.
We had a question
Sure.
for you to address. Actually,
Okay. I need to get a quick drink too as we do this. Okay.
Someone was asking about pinching the little side flowers on peonies. Is that something you do?
I don't
Obviously
do
not
it.
over here.
If you were maybe doing it for cut flowers, you only wanted one big blossom, you might do that. I have big clusters there. I like mass, so I don't do that. I don't have time.
I remember doing that growing up.
Yeah.
But I think certain peonies have more side shoots like that one.
Ton of them. I mean, that still has good side shoots, but
Yeah.
it has like 3 to 4. And that's something I should say. The Itos, typically your tree peonies only have one flower to a terminal. Itos will have 1 to 3 or 4, sometimes at maximum, because of that hybrid with the lactifloras. So
ultimately it comes down to if they want one flower for cut flower purposes or
Yeah.
one big one.
yeah, and I haven't done it, but the cut flower people have said they can cut these peonies and they can store them in tight bud for literally months, wrapped in a paper towel or something like that in the refrigerator. I don't know how they do it, and it just has to be at the right temperature. And then they rehydrate them and they open.
And I think I remember seeing something somewhere. My brother, I think, pointed it out. I think some grower actually cuts their peonies back and forces another whole entire flush. And
I don't know if you can do that here,
season.
but who knows?
No, and I don't think you do it every year.
Yeah, that probably be hard on them. So this is what we have as over this direction. Now Alexander's got here. We're next to what we have as Peonia Lactiflora, the more or less common peony here. Normally this is peak right now. Now it's like 3 to 4 days past and they've all shattered, but we have a few blossoms left on here. This is just a straight Peonia Lactiflora. And these actually self-sow a bit here for us in the this little corner here. This clump, I don't even know the origin of it. It used to be in front of our old lath house. There's no accession information on this plant. It's so old. So it's probably 35 to 40 years old is my guess.
I think it's been here as long as I've lived in this state, since 1993.
I remember digging this from out in front of the lath house in 2009 and moving it over here in preparation for the removal of the lath house. It did not miss a beat. It has been great. So, and normally for our gala, it was as gorgeous as ever, but Monday it still looked nice.
And I think it's one of my absolute favorites here at the Arboretum.
Yeah, everyone stops and looks at this peony, and it's just a generic Lactiflora type. So. We don't have a name on this one, but the seedlings typically look the same, and there's actually one right here, for instance. And there's other ones that have come up in here have already flowered. That's a year or two from flowering it. So, but we won't have to move too far for the next couple peonies. So we got some more Lactiflora hybrids here. They may include some other things, looking at some of these, but there's 2 different ones here. This is Garden Lace, which opens a soft pink. It's already faded. And it almost to a white now. It's just the lightest pink. It's a little bit darker normally. This is, let me look here. I need my cheat sheet. Let's see here and find which page it's on. So let's see. I think I see it. Yeah, Garden Lace. This is a Japanese form peony. So the Japanese form is a single to semi-double petals with a tight decorative center of staminodes. So these aren't quite stamens. They've been modified, but they're not petals either. So to get this really nice yellow center in there, it's a style that they in Japan apparently have found in favor, and a lot of them have been selected for that. Though this breeding was done, and actually in 1992, this one was introduced by Hollingsworth. And do I have Hollingsworth's first name? I don't remember now at this point. I had him here at some point, but anyways, by Mr. Hollingsworth. Was the breeder of this one. And then actually behind it is a similar one. This is Stellar Charm, which It has a good bud set on it. It's a little, the flower, here's one that has just opened. It has more yellow to it. Again, it has a similar form, but this is considered an anemone type. It doesn't have, it has more petal than staminode. So the stamens are still pretty apparent on the garden lace, but on the stellar charm, the stamens have been converted to more petal. So it gives it a little bit different look. It's a white with a yellow cluster in the middle that fades. I really like both of these. They've been really good bloomers. One I wasn't going to talk about, and I didn't, it's almost totally done. It was gorgeous last week, is Requiem, which is a white with lots of stamens in it. It was probably, that's probably would be considered a Japanese type as well. I really like the bold foliage on it. I don't know, it looks like it has something more than Lactiflora in it. I could be wrong on that though, but it has really nice, big, bold foliage. So that gets these right through here. I don't know if Chris and Alexander are ready to kill me yet or not for having to make them move so much. And we've only just gotten started. Are there any questions about these?
Tim, how long after planting a peony does it take for it to flower?
It depends.
Yeah.
It depends how big your division is. When we got some of these, I think some of them actually flowered the first year. They were donated, like I said, most of these were donated by the Peony Society. And when we received them, I stored them in the refrigerator, and this was in the late summer, fall. And they kind of broke dormancy really quickly when I planted them. They got their chill requirement, and they started coming up in January. The fall, and we had, that was a year we were down to 5, I think, and they were in bud, some of them. And some of them actually flowered. But they were really nice sized divisions. If you're getting one, like I hate to say it, the big box stores and you buy a bag, it's probably not going to flower the first year. If you're buying them, that is in the spring especially. If a spring planted one, I would not expect it to flower unless it's container grown. If you get them from a peony grower directly, you have a much higher chance of getting one that's going to flower the first year. Typically, I would expect the second to third year to start to getting a decent number of flowers.
When I worked at a garden center, we used to get them in either a 3 or 5 gallon container where they were established plants. Yeah. They always came in flowering sizes. Yeah, and container grown ones, if they're well established, you can get them, buy them in flower or to flower the following spring. But if you're going to buy the bare roots, I would get them from a peony specialty nursery if you want them to flower the first year, because they have a much better chance. Like I said, the box store ones, generic ones, they're probably going to be a lot smaller tubers or tuberous roots, and they're going to be like the second grade probably. They're not going to be the high grade ones, so you're less likely to get them to flower that first year or two. You typically have to let them establish for a few years and settle in. But once they're established, ignore them. Don't do anything to them. Don't protect them. One of the grad students in the back, I almost had to laugh. He's now graduated, but he was growing them as a cut flower production. It didn't get quite that far. They were smaller divisions again. Hadn't done too much yet. This is like the third year. They're starting to flower now. But the first 2 winters he was here, he covered them in the winter. And it's like, I didn't think they needed that. He came from North Dakota, where I think they needed to be covered probably in the winter. Here, they want that cold because we don't have enough cold. The irises, I think, are a plant that you only have to divide if you want more than one.
Yeah, I mean, the beardeds, which I'll talk about that a little bit. The beardeds want to be divided relatively frequently to keep the vigor up.
A peony, though.
A peony, you don't, only divide those if you have to. They have a big root system. Yes.
Otherwise, they can stay put for 30 years.
Oh, 40, 50. They'll outlive buildings. They'll be an old farmstead. You'll know it was there because there's a row of peonies, and there's nothing much left other than the archaeological evidence of a stone wall buried somewhere, and there'll still be peonies there. So it's like crinums in the south, the peonies are in the north. They outlive the houses they were planted around. This is another of the Itos that we're in front of here. There's only a couple left. This was so nice yesterday. This is Pink Double Dandy. It's one of the Ito peonies, again, the intersectionals. And what I didn't tell you earlier about the intersectionals, they have foliage similar to that of a tree peony. And you can really see that here. It's this nice deep cut foliage. It's very attractive. But you get it also had the form of the flowers are a little bit satiny or silky to me, you know, thin. They look like they should be on a Japanese painting or cloth work, textile, you know. They have that kind of look to them. And you get some of these different colors. This in case is a salmony pink, which I really like on this one. But again, this is almost done again. But the other thing is, because of the tree peony, this also has some wood to it. This past 2 winters, we've had wood survive on these. They don't die the whole way to the ground if we have a mild winter. You can cut it down to the ground. It'll still flower fine and dandy, but these keep a little bit of the wood of the tree peonies, but tree peonies are a little more difficult to propagate. You could have to do them by grafting. They can't be rooted. They're hard to, they don't divide. But the herbaceous hybrids here, the intersectional hybrids, you can divide them just like you do an herbaceous peony. So it makes the propagation a little simpler. But this one here, like I said, this is Pink Double Dandy, and this was one, a 2004 introduction by Smith. D.R. Smith was the guy who introduced this one here, and it was a Lactiflora Martha W. was the one parent crossed with a Golden Era, which I don't know if that was another Ito or if it was a tree peony, to tell you the truth. I don't remember, and I didn't look that part up. But anyways, really nice colors on this, which unfortunately are just a little bit past. If you were here on Monday, it was still really pretty. But next to it, we have another Lactiflora selection here. This is Peonia Tratford W. Bigger. Bigger, I don't know his first name, but Bigger was one of the breeders. And I think this was named after his brother. If I remember right, I just saw it in passing when I was reading last night. This is a really cool color. When it came out, it was more of a burgundy color. It's still a deep red, but it's just spectacular. It's again, I believe, let's see, is this, this is considered a Japanese type again. So it has the staminodes. So the stamens are still visible, but they're partially converted to petals. So you get that in the center. And this selection was from breeding in 1966 is when it was introduced. So it is a really beautiful peony as far as I'm concerned. And it's an odd color. It's not just a deep purpley red. It's burgundy red at times. So I really like this one. And it's done really well for us.
That one doesn't seem to have the secondary flowers on the side.
It has a few.
A few.
But it's not as profuse. So it's not as profuse as the First Lady that we were seeing there earlier. Or not First Lady, Miss America.
And the stems look great for cut flowers on that one.
Yes, this one, you wouldn't have to do a lot of this budding for cut. So I'm going to go around here, and we're going to go back to irises. We can just stand right here for the moment, since I have water flowing behind me. But a lot of our bearded iris, that's the most familiar iris everyone sees, especially right now at this time of the year, are the bearded irises. They are complex hybrids. The bearded irises are a group of irises that originates more or less around the Mediterranean. And there's like between 20 and 30 different species involved in that complex of irises. And have been used in some of the breeding work. So they are really complex, and I'm not going to say who these belong to because I have no clue. I did a little bit of digging last night. I'm not an iris person per se, so I just know a little bit about this and that. But this one here is a really nice purple falls. And the beard on the bearded iris is actually right here. It doesn't just have, it actually has pollen on the beard, if I remember right. It's little hairs. I don't know if you can see it, but actually here, we'll snap one of these. So you can see this. I don't know if Alexander can get that. Can you see the beard in there, Chris?
Yeah.
Okay. In there, you can actually see the beard. On the previous ones I showed you, they were crested iris. So it wasn't a hairy strip there. There were little, there was a little ridge there, but it wasn't hairy like that. So it wasn't a beard. But on this one, the falls are purple and the standards, or the upright ones, are this just a palest of blue. And this one doesn't have a great smell right now, but some of them are known for the really good fragrance. This one I can't smell, but this is Slovak Prince. And let's see what I can add about Slovak Prince when I go down through here. Okay. I have him somewhere here. I looked this up last night. Anyways, this is actually one that was introduced in 2002, and it got a couple different awards. I didn't write down the Iris awards because I figured no one, unless you're an Iris person, would know what they meant, because I don't mean anything to me either, to tell you the truth. But this one got multiple awards over the last 15 years or so. But the breeder of this was Anton Migo. So it's a relatively new, a newer one, though there's new irises that come out every year. So, but this is Slovak Prince, a really nice, tall bearded iris. I have one stuck in here because I don't think Chris and Alexander want to move not too far away from here, but I hid this one in here. This is one I really like. This is one Iris Ride the Tiger. It's this, I don't even know how to describe it. It's not bright yellow. It's kind of a brownish yellow, but it's not an ugly brownish yellow, and has hints of purple in the falls. It would be, I think they call it, the color is self, I believe, because it's uniform pretty much between the falls and the standards. Or the standards. So another one there, and let's see, do I have anything about it? It's another 2002 selection from Larry Losser. So that's actually just over to the side here, and they're just coming out. So there's still quite a few flowers on these. They're not as far along as this Slovak Prince right here. So I'm just gonna set this one back down, and we're gonna go right back here. And we're gonna get another bearded, which is relatively close, and not make Chris and Alexander move too far.
We're doing good.
Oh, they haven't got to the fun trips yet. This is one that everyone remarks at. The color on this one is spectacular. This is Golden Panther, and I don't know why you'd call it Golden Panther. It is screaming orange. And it's one of our friends at the Arboretum, Bret Arthur's favorites. She has a cat that Sophia, and she's a long-haired, golden-colored cat, and her nickname is Golden Panther. So Bret loves this one, and I've actually was able to get her a division of this one. But the bearded iris here, this is another one, multiple awards on this one, and it's a 2000 introduction from Richard Tasco. And Chris was mentioning earlier about dividing peonies, and he actually mentioned iris as a slip up on the tongue, and I caught him. But anyways, irises, the bearded iris, for instance, they want to be divided relatively frequently to keep the vigor up. Otherwise, they'll start to get a little bit run down, but you can divide the heck out of them and it doesn't hurt. Good time to do it is when they go dormant after they flower, and then you can plant, you can do it anytime until the year in reality. But a really good time is they'll start to look really sad here in about a month and a half after they're flowering. And August, September is a really good time to reset them. So you can amend the soils. You don't have to overly do it, but the rhizomes just go right on top of the ground, more or less, and the roots in the soil. They're really easy to do. Some of the irises we look at later on, they don't need to be divided except for, unless you want to do it every 10 to 15 years. So this one is a frequent, I'd say 4 to 5 years would be a good time to let these settle in before dividing them again. So to keep up that good vigor. And you can clean them out. You can get rid of dead old rhizomes. It just helps keep them healthy. And then you can share them with your neighbors. So any questions about that?
Marianne is asking, do you cut back the leaves on the irises?
You can, because they tend to get a little bit ugly. and depends how dormant they go too. If they keep on flushing new leaves, I will, if you have time, you can just take off the side leaves. That is, if you're leaving them in the ground. If you're dividing them, I will actually cut them back just so they don't act as a flag and pull the rhizome out of the ground after you've planted it.
The Beret Iris is often look really horrible towards the end of the summer.
Yes,
so
and actually
mow them down pretty much.
Yeah, these are actually, this golden panther is actually starting to go down already, even though it's in full flower. So
that would be a way to freshen them up. But irises in the wintertime often here,
they'll stay active growing partially at least. So I don't know, Tim, I didn't even look up this cultivar. I feel bad. But what I wanted to show here is, this is one, a group of irises, which I'm going to call the water irises. It's like yellow water iris, our native Iris virginiana, our native versicolor, the Japanese water iris, the Iris insata and Iris laudagata. This in the yellow water iris, Iris pseudacaris, which is actually almost a weed in parts of the country. It's naturalized in waterways, but this is in that complex. This is actually an specific or an hybrid. This is a cross between an Iris laudagata, no, I take that back, and an Iris insata and an Iris pseudacaris. So this is a sudata. So these tend to be sterile or nearly sterile, so you don't have the issues that you would with some of the yellow water irises. And this one's just gorgeous. It's flowering for the first time. Doug planted this here last summer. Beautiful veins on the falls. The standards on these tend to be rather short. They aren't real tall, because here's the standards that you saw in the big bearded iris that were that much taller. This one's just getting started, first flower stalk on it. This is Iris sudata, and I'm going to mutilate this name. It's Sakai no Ogon. So I know Ogon means gold. So I don't know what Sakai no adds to that, but it's something gold. But first of this group of irises we're going to look at. But the water irises, as I'm putting it, that subgroup or that subgenus, they're all over the world in both North America, Asia, and Europe. So they do very well for us. They don't have to be in the water. And actually, I have some other sudatas over near the monocot garden. They're not even thinking about flowering yet, but super vigorous. They'll be flowering probably the mid to late month of May, maybe even early June. This is an early flowering one. So, but they're super vigorous. They're already like 2.5, 3 feet tall and haven't even budded. So I don't get to show those to you today. But we're going to still get out that far, hopefully. So the Louisiana iris are about 5 different species that are, from the Gulf Coast area, predominantly around Louisiana. But that's not totally where their name comes from. And let me see, I have a little note on that somewhere if I find the right page. We'll get here. These are just beginning to open, but this is Iris brevicollis, or collis. And let's see here. Where did I put that page? Okay, here we go. So, here we go. The Louisiana iris, they're actually one of the beardless iris group, which the crested iris are as well. So anyways, like I said, there's about 5 species, very closely related species, but there's some variation in them height-wise, and they often grow in wet areas, but they'll take typical garden conditions. Louisiana's got their name. Actually, I found this online. The name Louisiana iris comes from the naturalist and artist John James Audubon. In 1821, a Louisiana iris, in this case Iris flava, which is one of the other species, which we don't have in the garden, was painted by his assistant Joseph Mason. Then Audubon added his pair of Parula warblers. He then used the term Louisiana flag to describe the painting, and that's where the Louisiana iris or Louisiana flag name comes from. Flava is one of those 5, like I said, the species. And this is another of those species. This is Brevicollis. And I love this mass. It's just beginning to flower. Unfortunately, there's a handful of them, but I don't, there's some that are soft lavender. There's some purple ones. There's some that are pink in this mass here. We've divided this over the years, and there's just always a beautiful collection of them. In the next 2 to 3 weeks, will be in full flower. So if you want to come and see an iris, it'll be flowering still for us. Here's one. I'll pick one of these. This is Iris brevicollis, and it tends to be a little bit shorter. They actually look really big this year. Sometimes they're only a foot or so tall. This year, I'd say they're over 2 feet. Could be all that rain we had this past winter. But this is one of the species of the Louisiana iris.
So some people may not know that flag is another
flag is another term.
iris.
Growing up, I remember back home in Pennsylvania, my grandmother would say the flags or iris were in flower. So that's another of the names for iris.
And if I'm not mistaken, isn't the fleur-de-lis on the French flag an iris?
Exactly, it is, and that's probably Pseudacarus,
yep.
which is native to Western Europe, including France. So, hence the fleur-de-lis. Yes. But over here, I have some more of the Louisiana type irises. This is one. If anybody got an iris in, or some of the irises we had last year in our plant sale. So a year ago. This was one we offered. This is Dixie Deb, which, what do I know about Dixie Deb? I have her somewhere here. Dixie Deb, she's an old, as I put, an oldie but goodie. She was registered in 1950. The breeder was Frank Chowning, which that comes into this next one I'm going to show you here. But, and it was awarded let's see, Mary Swords DeBallion Award in 1967. So, but a 3 foot or so Louisiana iris, great in wet spots or just your average soil. It'll be perfectly fine and happy. Very vigorous. This was just all planted here actually March of last year, just the day before we shut down. So we already have a big stand of them growing here. They're doing really well in this new rain garden here. So that's another of our Louisianas. And I just mentioned Frank Chowning, and I'm assuming this is Ann Chowning, which is one we have in our perennial border. And I didn't think Chris and Alexander would want to go over the perennial border after being right here and then back over to the monocot garden where we're ultimately going to end up. So I brought a cut specimen here. This is Ann Chowning, a beautiful red and yellow iris here, Louisiana type iris. And I didn't find out if Ann is his daughter or his wife, or mother, but I figure it's someone related to Frank. So same spelling of the last name. So a spectacular red Louisiana iris. And this is just beginning to flower in our perennial border. And it's every year, this is one of my favorites. It's the only one we have of that color in the garden. Let's see, somewhere here. Eolaine, this is another Louisiana. I don't know as much about it, but this is from Arnie was the breeder in 1967. This is just a soft lavender blue, I'm gonna say. It's not quite pure blue, and it's not purple, but it's a really nice, about a 3 footer again, growing in the perennial border. We've had it for several years. I saw multiple spellings of the name, so I'm not quite sure. We had one spelling, and I saw online a couple other spellings. So Eolaine, I'm going to either spelled with E-O-L-I-A-N or A-E-O-L-I-A-N. I'm not sure. We might have to look that one up as a name check, I think. Anyways, a really nice Louisiana iris. And while we're right here, another good companion plant for those irises are some of the nepetas or the catmints. They flower around the same time as your bearded iris and your Louisianas. And these are good to put at the base of them. They can be used to hide some of the ugliness later on too. So but this is one of the nepetas here that we just planted. And I don't know which one it is. I didn't look. So this was one we had, I think in the trials last year, called Sylvester Blue. So Sylvester the cat. So anyways, that is a really nice nepeta to companion plant for your irises.
Right.
Another that goes to the water iris group, as I was talking about earlier. This is one of the Iris virginicas. So this is one of our native iris. This is Carl Amundsen. Carl, I looked up a little bit about him, and if I remember right, darn, I'm going to lose it. He was Carl actually found this iris, if I remember right, and if I find the right sheet, I can tell you the story. Yes, Carl collected this this clone of virginica along the, I'm going to mutilate this name, Ouachita River in Arkansas, which Ouachita is Ouachita. So, but anyways, and then it was subsequently named by a friend of Carl's apparently that had he had given it to, from what I understand. So, anyways, it's just this soft pink or soft purple or pink with beautiful veining in it, and a nice stripe of yellow on the falls to guide the insects down in there, and the standards are the same color pretty much. So it would be a self. Anyways, a really nice Iris virginica. So we have, I think, one really long trek here coming. And we're going to head out to the monocot garden to get the last few irises.
Tim, Vandy says Ouachita is pronounced Wichita.
Okay.
If I'm reading the whole thing correctly.
I have no clue. That Vandy would know. We don't have too many of these in our garden. I'll let Alexander get set up for a moment and find the best place to maybe see these things. This is a Spuria Iris. This is actually one of the species types. We don't have any of the hybrid Spurias in the garden, but this is Irispuria subspecies. Oh, let's see if I can spit it. Cartholiniae. So Carthage, more or less, I think. But I believe that wouldn't make sense because this is from the Caucasus area again. But anyways, it's from the Mediterranean. The Spuria Iris, Southern Europe, a band over into Western China is where you find the Spuria type irises. They're irises that are really good for drier climates, as well as hot climates. So these can go from the Gulf Coast, I'm told, up into like zone 3. And they'll be reasonably happy. What they don't like is wet in the summer so much. So these can be in that drier spot in your yard. They want full sun. They'll take a little bit of shade, but they're not as happy. All the ones we have are smaller flowered. I've seen some of the larger flowered hybrids in the Western United States when I've been able to travel in Colorado as well as out in Oregon. But this is just a soft lavender colored one here on this one. And the foliage on these can be rather large. Some species and hybrids of Spurias can range up to 5 feet tall. And they tend to stand upright really well. They don't flop. They don't, despite the fact that they can take drier climates, they don't really want to dry out. If you move them or divide them, you don't let them dry out. You need to have them the roots covered in lightly moistened soil at least. Or even in, I was reading something about water. You could have them in water for a few days, but they don't want to be wet permanently. And they aren't afraid of typical moisture, you know, a wet, rainy day. It's if they're prolonged wet is the detrimental thing for them. But this is one we grew from seed several years ago. It's just getting started. We tortured it in our nursery where it was probably too wet. And it's starting to take off. You can see it's almost done flowering, but you can see how many flowers there were on this. There were quite a few flowers per stalk. So they've done a decent display. We're gonna go look at this one here. And I didn't realize what this, I mean, I knew the genus or the species on this one, but I didn't realize what group it belonged to. This is again a Spurium. This is Iris Gramine. And so Gramine meaning like grass, I believe. That Gramine is the old name for, or one of the older names used for plants in the grass family, and which is now more often called Poaceae. But anyways, but this species ranges anywhere from about 1 foot tall to 3 feet tall. Our specimen likes to be the foot tall, and I actually like it like that. beautiful deep purple flower in this case on this one. This plant actually was donated to us by Bobby Ward when he was relocating a few years ago. But we used to have one up on our roof garden years ago when I first started. We lost it. But this again is a Spurium Iris. It's done really well. Its flowers at head off. On this little foot wide clump, there's probably 30 or 40 flowers on there, open all at once. I can't smell it right now, but I do remember, and I was reading again, they sometimes, this iris is noted for a plum-like fragrance. But I think the air is moving too much. I can't denote it today. And it's not because I have COVID, because I don't. I've been vaccinated. But anyways, cute little variable species here, the Iris Gramine. Again, a spurium. It will be happy as a clam to dry out through the summer. Good one for the West or here in North Carolina. So I think I have one last stop. I totally ignored some of the irises, like the bulbous irises, like Dutch iris and reticulatus. Those flowered for us. Actually, the Dutch iris just finished flowering, and the reticulatus, they're winter flowering for us. Yeah, we're gonna stop, I think, like right here, so we can get that and another. Yeah, we'll do this one. This is another of the bearded irises, and this one I just love the color. I don't know if you guys can see it. It is dark. This is Iris Midnight Oil, and it is the beautiful black bearded iris, and it's a relatively recent one. 1998 is when it was introduced by Keith Keppel, and it was noted for actually having a good fragrance. Let's see if I can smell it. I can't. Oh, I can smell it lightly. Like I said, the air is moving really well today, so the fragrance has been dissipated. It's super dark. It's a black purple. You can see the purple tones with the light going through it. It is just a gorgeous little iris. Okay, this is another of the spuriums group. I believe this is Notha. I have to check to make sure. I had a couple different species. Yeah, this is Notha. Again, this is from the Caucasus region. It's very similar to the Spuria subspecies Cartholiniae. I can't spit that out. At times, it's been lumped into the species or Spurium species, and it was subspecies Notha. So, but again, it's another 3-footer or so. Really nice soft blue on that one. So, think that's going to end pretty much our tour of irises and peonies. If there's any questions that I can maybe make up an answer for.
So are there any Cartholinians related to Siberian irises?
Let me think. No, they are not. They're in a different group. I didn't even touch the Siberians. I can't remember. There's 2 main groups of irises, and then that second main group is divided into another, I don't know, 8 or 10 different groups. So it's like, and I think they're within that first subgroup, but not within the other divisions. I didn't give you any of the technical names for the family or the groups of irises. There's a whole bunch of them. I can tell you that though.
So we just had a question: is when is the best time? And of course, there's so many comments going. I just missed it.
The best time?
I think best time to divide iris tenax. Did I see that right?
Tenax.
Yeah. I don't know what that one is.
That's one of the West Coast irises. The Pacific Coast irises. I can kill those here. My guess is a lot. Late summer, fall would probably be the best time because they're going to be coming out of dormancy then. Much like our bearded iris, they spend the summer sleeping a little bit, semi-dormant. And then they flush through the winter. They're active through the winter and into spring. And then the Pacific Northwest goes totally dry during the summer, and they tend to spend the summer napping. So my guess, not having grown too many of the Pacific Coast because they aren't overly happy here in the Southeast. I've had a few and we've killed them after a couple years. That would be my guess. So I would guess late summer. There is a whole Pacific Coast Iris. You could search that online. There are whole groups for that. So they could better tell you, but that would just be my educated guess.
Okay. And we had a good question earlier, and I forgot to ask it. What is this salt tolerance of iris?
That I can't say, and it might depend on the species too. Again,
you see any of them got your relatives at the beach?
But they're inland a little bit. But with those Pacific Coast ones, for instance, I've had the opportunity to spend some time in Oregon in 2009, and I saw them just above the high tide zone. So of some of the Pacific Coast irises. I don't know if they ever got inundated or not. I wouldn't be surprised, say some of the Louisianas might have a little bit. I don't know if they go out into the bayous or not. With some of those species, and they may have a little bit of salt tolerance too. You never know. Or some of those Middle Eastern ones, the soils could just be saline. It's hard to say. Yeah. So I wouldn't be surprised if there is some salt tolerance. It would be worth a try.
So we do have a lot of people asking for the names of the irises over again. I just want to let people know that you can scroll up in the chat and actually get the names of the irises. And you can also click on the 3 little dots that are right there in the chat window to save it so you can go back and review it. And that way you can learn that the black one is called Midnight Oil and the invasive one is Iris pseudacaris, because those were both answered in the chat. Chat is a collection of all the previous things. Even if it's off the screen, it's still there and still visible. I think I saw one that went pretty quickly. When's the best time to divide bearded irises, which I think you talked about.
Bearded iris, I mean, you can do it anytime, but I would suggest maybe mid to late summer. So like August is a really good time, just before they're coming into their main growth again in the fall. But you can do it almost anytime you have a chance. If you have a friend who sees an iris in your garden and they really like it, it's not going to hurt it to dig up a hunk and give it to them.
And review the sun likings for the Idopenies and include what you think it might be for zone 9A.
Oh, they'd be borderline in 9A. I don't know how far they'd go. Again, the Peony Society has a really good website. They may be able to tell you recommendations for a zone 9A selections. I'm not going to go too far there. That's getting a little warm. But I would think the Itos would be better chances than the straight Lactifloras, excuse me, which are from further north. The tree peonies tend to be from a little bit further south as well in more mild climates. So they don't have as high of chill requirements.
9A was Orlando, and I don't remember anything.
Yeah, I don't know. That's and it might depend if it's a Pacific North 9A versus a Florida 9A. There's a big difference there on the chill. So.
And do you recommend cutting the flower stems off of irises?
I mean, for aesthetic purposes, yes, you very much can do that. And it'll also keep them from going to seed. Some of them are a little more promiscuous and will go to seed. If you have Iris pseudacaris, I would definitely deadhead it if you can, though they are pretty profuse. Your bearded iris, they occasionally set a seed pod, but just for the aesthetics, I would cut them back, but you're probably going to clean them up anyways after they flower because the foliage starts to look like a little bit on the sad side. Some of your other ones, like the Spurias, are known for looking decent most of the season, even though they do, if it gets really dry, they will go somewhat dormant. Some
of the flower stems are also a lot bigger on those bearded irises.
Yes, exactly. And as really if Alexander turns around and looks at this other bearded iris that I did not mention, I can't remember that one offhand, but the nice yellow one, you can see how many spent flower stalks are on that clump.
Yeah, that's just ugly.
So it's not the prettiest to look at.
Yeah. So nice pruning would make that look a lot better. Well, it looks good. Looks like the chat is now quiet. So that looks like it concludes our tour. And we'll see everyone again next week for a midweek with Marv.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us, everyone. And remember, if you want to save the chat, you can do that with the 3 little dots in the lower right side of the chat window. Actually, top right side of the chat window. Thanks, everyone. See you next week.